She buried her past in the shadows of Karachi, until a photograph shattered everything she thought was true. Her mother's death was a lie. Now the real story begins. My name is Selina Khawaja. For the longest time I thought the flaw was mine. That if I just kept quieter, smiled wider, tried harder, maybe he'd finally see me. Maybe he'd look at me the way he did when Jake hit a home run or when Ryan got that C turned into a B. But he never did. Not with pride. Not with interest. Just a vacant sort of acknowledgement, the kind reserved for strangers in elevators. My father, Richard, didn't need to shout. He'd never slam doors or raise fists. His disinterest was more efficient than rage ever could be. His quiet dismissal stripped me of worth more effectively than words ever would. The silence, the nothingness, that was what gutted me. I was 12 when I first understood the hierarchy. It was Father's Day. I had poured my heart into a handmade card. Glitter smudged my fingers. The edges of the paper curled where I'd pressed too hard while writing a poem. After dinner, I gave it to him, trembling with anticipation. He glanced at it, muttered thanks, and returned to watching the game on TV. Minutes later, Ryan tossed him a generic mug that read, "Number 1 Dad." My father beamed, as if the object glowed. He turned the mug in his hands like it was sacred, then pulled Ryan into a side hug. That was when I realized. In our house, love had a ranking. Jake, the oldest, was effortless charm. He could win over anyone with a grin and 3 words. Ryan, the youngest, was the golden boy of the sports world, a star athlete whose trophies seemed to multiply like weeds. And me. I was the in-between. Quiet one. The girl in the room who didn't belong to the light. The one who turned emotions into sketches, who filled journals instead of dinner conversations. My mother tried in her own way. She'd pull me close, whisper I was unique, tell me I saw the world differently. But even she obeyed the unspoken script. Ryan always got the last piece of dessert. Jake always got the money. When I asked for a sketchpad, Dad barely looked up. "What's the point?" he said. "You quit everything anyway." That line didn't just hurt. Branded me. At the dinner table, I became the placeholder between their accomplishments. They talked. They listened. If I chimed in, Dad would glance in my direction with mechanical politeness, then turn back to the real stars of the table. Over time I grew quiet. But inside, something sharper than sadness grew. Something with claws. I poured that bitterness into my work. I stayed up late. Excelled. Not for him anymore. For me. To prove I wasn't invisible. That I existed. I stopped chasing his attention and started building a life that even he couldn't ignore. Holidays were illusions. Perfect laughter. Perfect smiles. Perfect lies. Jake cracking jokes in the kitchen. Ryan throwing a football outside. Dad laughing with a beer. But behind that picture-perfect facade, I hovered like a background shadow. Jake had his inside jokes with Dad, a handshake, a tradition. I saw them once, bent over a napkin with Jake explaining a startup pitch. Dad looked at him like he held the cure to death. "That's a leader's mind," he said. Ryan was the sports king. Soccer trophies lined his shelves. Dad never missed a game. When Ryan scored, Dad threw a party with lights and neighbors and noise. I was there too. Cleaning up. Setting the table. Watching. The only time I got a nod of approval was when I made it into the honors program. No party. No cheer. Just a nod. Honors, huh? That's nice. As if I'd announced I'd reorganized my sock drawer. I didn't hate my brothers. They were kind. They never mocked me. Never rubbed their spotlight in my face. But they didn't see me either. Because he didn't. And when the father doesn't see, the house doesn't notice. I started believing I would never hear the words I craved. "I'm proud of you." Not out of pity, but because it was true. Then came the moment that split everything. It wasn't just a business. It was every tear I'd cried in silence. Every ignored talent. Every whisper of potential. My startup was a digital platform that connected niche creators with local investors. It was small, but it was mine. Built from empty validation and painful resolve. I poured everything into the launch, hired a venue, sent invitations, practiced my pitch until I couldn't feel my throat. When I took the stage, I could feel the room lean forward. People were listening, not out of obligation, out of interest. That day, I saw myself reflected in their eyes. And she wasn't a shadow. The applause afterward didn't just echo in the room. It echoed through my whole being. But then came the dinner. The family's traditional gathering to honor everything except me. I walked into the dining room carrying my quiet triumph. My brothers arrived, confident as ever, spilling stories like champagne. Dad took the head of the table, nodding with pride at every athletic triumph and business deal. When I tried to speak, he waved me off. "We know you're busy," he said. The room shifted. The air got heavier. That was it. That dismissal wasn't new. But this time, it cracked something that had held me together for years. I didn't react. I didn't flinch. But something shifted behind my eyes. I realized then that no achievement would ever move him. That no matter how many stages I stood on, he'd always glance toward someone else. I stopped seeking him after that. Not out of resentment, but because the story had changed. Moved. Quietly. Without announcements. I found a small apartment on the edge of the city, tucked between silence and ambition. I rebuilt my life there. Scraped by on freelance work. Ate toast for dinner. Learned code at 2 a.m. Cried. Pushed. Failed. Started again. I didn't post about it. I didn't share links. I let them forget. They didn't ask. I didn't offer. The company grew inch by inch. I found clients who were also overlooked. Creators with raw talent and no voice. We understood each other. We built something together. A year later we had investors. Small office. Car I bought myself. My name changed legally. They wouldn't recognize it. They never bothered asking. I was building something sacred in the silence. Something no one could take. And then 2 years later I sent a message to the family group chat. "I'll be there for dinner." Just that. No emojis. No explanation. The responses were half-hearted. Thumbs up from Jake. A confused smile from Mom. Silence from Dad. The night before dinner, I signed papers at a dealership. A luxury car, sleek black, purring with restrained power. It waited outside like a witness. In my hand, an envelope. Inside, the document that would end one legacy and begin another. I dressed carefully. Not to dazzle, but to remember. Each detail, each stitch, reminded me who I was now. When I pulled into the driveway, the car's engine hushed to a stop like a held breath. Laughter spilled from the patio. "Hey, Ryan." Dad at the head, drinking, smiling. His kingdom intact. Then he saw me. A flicker of surprise. Then the smile returned. "Look who finally showed up." Smiled. "Happy Father's Day." Dinner began. Jokes, stories, celebrations. Jake bragged about property. Ryan talked about wins. Dad soaked it all in like it was earned. And then I stood. "I have something for you." I walked out. Retrieved the envelope. Placed it before him. He opened it. "Read." And the color drained from his face. His fingers trembled. "What is this?" "Just read." Questions. The room shifted. The paper detailed the acquisition. The change of ownership. The reversal. Your company. A house. Your shares. All of it. Dad looked at me like I'd turned to smoke. "Jake gave." Ryan whispered. And I stood still. "I own it," I said. The silence was the loudest thing in the room. Then I turned. Walked to the door. His voice cracked behind me. Not in anger. In fear. And that was just the beginning. As the rain began to fall harder, drenching the quiet streets of the old city, Ava stood frozen in front of the antique bookstore that had remained closed for years. The scent of wet cobblestone and rotting leaves clung to the air, stirring something forgotten deep within her. This was the place where she had once found solace as a child, the only place that ever felt like home when everything else fell apart. The window was dusty, the door covered in vines, but something inside called to her. She pushed the door gently, expecting resistance, but it creaked open with surprising ease. Inside, the shop looked exactly as she remembered. Wooden shelves sagged under the weight of time-worn books. The scent of paper and ink wrapped around her like an embrace. She walked slowly past the counter, tracing her fingers over the surface that had once held her drawings. She could still hear the faint hum of her father's favorite jazz vinyl spinning in the back room. Her throat tightened. This shop wasn't just a bookstore. It was her father's heart. A creak upstairs startled her. Ava's breath caught. The staircase to the upper floor had always been off-limits when she was young. Her father would disappear for hours behind that locked door. As she stepped toward it, the floor groaned beneath her. With each step upward, memories bled into her mind. Her father's weary eyes, his whispers to someone who was never there, the way he'd hold her too tightly some nights and cry silently into her hair. The door at the top of the stairs was ajar. Light flickered inside like candlelight. Pushing it open, she stepped into a room layered in dust and shadows. Maps were pinned across the walls. Red string connected locations. Newspaper clippings filled with headlines about disappearances, unsolved murders, political cover-ups, and pharmaceutical scandals. In the center, a corkboard was dedicated to a single name, hers. Ava turned pale. Pictures of her as a child, school reports, even her medical files were tacked with chilling precision. Before she could move, a voice broke the silence. Soft, almost broken. "I always knew you'd come back." A man stepped from the shadows. He looked nothing like her father. His hair was gray, his face gaunt, but his eyes held the same sadness Ava remembered. "Who are you?" she asked. "I'm the one who tried to protect you when no one else would. Your father wasn't who you thought he was." Ava. She felt her knees weaken. Her entire childhood was built around the idea that her father was a gentle, if broken man who loved her more than anything. But now that memory was cracking. He handed her a file. Her name was printed across the top. "Your father was part of a covert research unit. You were the subject." Ava flipped through the file. Charts, drug protocols, psychological evaluations, surveillance photos. This can't be true. The man sat heavily on an old wooden chair. He didn't want to hurt you, but they made him choose. His loyalty to the project or his love for you. In the end, he tried to sabotage it. That's why they erased your memory. Tears filled her eyes. "What project? What did they do to me?" He hesitated, then turned to the map behind him. "Project Lucerna. You were genetically modified, Ava. Not in a lab. In utero. The goal was to create a mind capable of absorbing and storing limitless information. Like a living archive." Ava's mind reeled. Suddenly the nightmares, the voices, the odd flashes of memories that never made sense, they weren't madness, they were fragments. "Why are you telling me this now?" "Because they know you're back. And they'll come for you." He pulled out an old cassette tape and handed it to her. "Your father's last message before they took him. Listen to it when you're alone." "But Ava, trust no one, not even the people you remember loving." Ava clutched the tape and ran. Rain poured down harder as she reached her apartment. She locked every bolt and collapsed on the floor. She stared at the tape, then slid it into her old stereo. The voice that emerged was cracked and tired but familiar. "Ava, if you're hearing this, it means I failed. But you must know I never stopped fighting for you. They'll tell you I was a monster. But the real monsters wear masks and sit in chairs of power. Run, Ava. Find the others. You're not alone." The tape cut off. A cold chill spread through her. She had lived her life believing she was unwanted, abandoned, broken. But now a darker truth loomed: she was created. The knock on the door came like thunder. One, two, three. Deliberate. Measured. She grabbed a knife from the kitchen and stepped slowly toward the peephole. Outside stood a woman soaked in raincoat, hair plastered to her face. In her hand was a locket. The same locket Ava had buried with her mother. The woman looked up slowly and whispered through the door. "Ava, it's time you remembered who your real family is. Selena stared at the door for minutes after Zion left. Her legs wouldn't move. Her heart, heavy with the weight of 2 decades, beat a rhythm soaked in pain and revelation. She wasn't sure what stunned her more, that her mother had died silently in a psychiatric facility, or that her father, the man she once idolized, had orchestrated the disappearance with surgical precision. Zion's words weren't just revelations. They were needles tearing through carefully bandaged wounds. Finally, her body moved before her thoughts could catch up. She rushed upstairs, grabbed the small duffel she'd kept ready ever since she'd arrived in Karachi, and stuffed in the essentials. She was done waiting. She had buried the little girl who had cried herself to sleep every night. Now Selena wanted answers, not whispered truths or veiled guilt, but the full story. And only one person still alive could give her that. The journey to Murray was a blur of green hills and rising fog. Memories crashed over her like waves, the scent of pine needles, the humming of her mother's lullaby, and the echo of her father's booming laugh. But they were distant, like scenes from a movie she hadn't watched in years. She reached the old house just as the mist began to thicken. The caretaker, now a hunched man with graying sideburns, opened the creaking gate without asking who she was. He knew. Perhaps he always had. The house looked the same, aging but standing like a witness refusing to die with the truth. Inside, the smell hit her first. Dust, mildew, and something faintly sweet like old perfume. Her mother's study remained untouched. A velvet shawl still rested on the back of a chair. Selena's hand trembled as she reached for the wooden cabinet that once held her mother's sketches. Behind the drawers, taped into the corner with yellowing adhesive, she found it. Letter. In trembling Urdu, her mother had written, "If you find this, my little starlight, I know I didn't disappear. I was erased. Your father feared what I knew. About him. About the family. You must be careful. The past, it's not just ours. It belongs to people who kill to protect it." Selena fell to the ground. Her mother hadn't been mentally ill. She had been silenced. Zion met her at a hilltop cafe, silent and remote. The letter trembled in her hand as she showed it to him. He didn't look surprised, only tired. "There's more," he said softly, pushing a leather file toward her. Inside were surveillance photos, bank transactions, even transcripts of calls between her father and an unnamed man referred to only as T. "They covered up more than your mother's truth. There's money laundering, property scams, things tied to powerful people. If this comes out, they won't just destroy your father. They'll come after anyone involved." Selena's eyes hardened. "Good. Let them." Zion leaned closer. "Be careful what you wish for. Truth doesn't cleanse. Sometimes it ignites." Amidst the chaos, something had shifted between her and Zion. Maybe it was the bond of shared pain, or the way he protected her without turning her into a victim. But love, or something dangerously close to it, had bloomed. Late one night, after poring over files and timelines, their hands touched. Neither moved away. "You deserve something real," he whispered. She wanted to believe it. She almost did. But trust was a burned currency, and her heart was still in recovery. With the mounting evidence, Selena demanded a meeting with her father. To her shock, he agreed, but under strict conditions. Loan. No police. No recordings. At the family mausoleum. Zion begged her not to go. But some truths couldn't be delivered secondhand. The mausoleum loomed like a tomb of secrets. Her father stood in its shadow, thinner than she remembered. His once slick hair now a brittle gray. He didn't look like a villain. That made it worse. "I only wanted to protect you," he said, voice brittle as the wind. "Your mother, she was unstable. She would have destroyed everything." "No," Selena snapped, eyes wet. "She would have destroyed you. There's a difference." He didn't deny it. Instead, he said the words that shattered what little illusion she had left. She knew about the fund, the offshore accounts, names. I begged her to stay silent. She wouldn't. So I had her committed. I never meant for her to die there. Selina trembled. But you let her. For 20 years. His silence was her answer. 2 days later, Selina awoke to the sound of glass shattering. Flames licked the curtains. Smoke clogged her lungs. Zion dragged her out just in time. Her files were gone. The letter burnt. Someone had been watching. Someone had acted. The message was clear. Stop digging or burn with the truth. They fled to Lahore, hiding in an old apartment Zion had once used for surveillance work. From there, Selina typed a letter to the press, enclosing what little evidence remained. She named names. She named her father. And she hit send. The story broke like a wave. Overnight, the Khawaja name crumbled. Arrests were made. Her father vanished. And still, Selina didn't feel vindicated. One evening weeks later, she stood on the same Karachi pier where her mother once took her for ice cream. Zion stood beside her, silent. I lost everything, she whispered. My mother. My innocence. Even revenge didn't bring peace. He took her hand. No. You gained something most people never find. What? Truth. And yourself. A letter arrived. No return address. Just her name. Inside a photograph. Her mother. Alive. In a crowded street. Wrinkled. Older. But unmistakably her. And a note scrawled on the back. You were never supposed to know. But now that you do, come find me. Selina's heart stopped. The Karachi sun was harsh, but Selina barely felt it. The photograph trembled in her hand. Her mother's eyes, older, wearier, seemed to pierce the decades. Every breath Selina took felt like it could shatter the fragile world she'd rebuilt. Zion read the note over her shoulder. You were never supposed to know. But now that you do, come find me. His voice was low. It could be fake. A trap. Or it could be her. Selina's voice broke. Zion, she's alive. They started with the background of the photo. An obscure market in Quetta, Balochistan. Dusty signage, a rickshaw number. A woman with a scarf patterned like a tribal motif. Selina hired a fixer. An ex-journalist with eyes like cracked glass. He worked quietly but effectively. Your mother disappeared the night of the fire, the fixer said, sifting through old security logs. But not before being seen boarding a military convoy. Someone wanted her erased, but not dead. Zion clenched his fists. The Khawaja syndicate. Or someone bigger. They followed the trail. Faint, half erased, but still there. Government names long scrubbed from records. Payments routed through dummy corporations. Women like her mother, vanished into protection programs that were anything but protective. Selina's nightmares came back. The fire. The silence. Her mother's voice calling her name then gone. It took 3 weeks to reach the outskirts of Mostung. The fixer had narrowed the location to a discreet clinic run by a midwife, known to harbor women who'd escaped political persecution. Selina approached the clay-walled home at dusk. Zion stayed back. Chinook. The woman who answered was wrinkled, her hair streaked with silver, but her posture was straight, guarded. Then their eyes met. Selina knew. No need for words. No DNA test. No ceremony. Her legs gave out and she dropped to her knees. Amy! Her mother didn't cry. She knelt too, holding Selina's face as if memorizing it. I begged them to spare you, she said. When I turned against your father's empire, exposing their smuggling routes, the trafficking, I thought I could protect you better by disappearing. Selina stared at her. You watched me grow up from afar. Every year, I sent gifts, through people you never knew. The teddy bear when you were 6. The earrings at your graduation. I couldn't be seen, but I never stopped being your mother. Selina sobbed. Years of questions poured out and still not enough answers came. That night, her mother explained everything. How she married into the Khawaja family without knowing the depth of their corruption. How she tried to walk away. How, when she threatened to expose their dealings, particularly the child trafficking ring hidden under their humanitarian front, her own husband ordered her disappearance. But someone in the agency helped me fake my death. He believed in what I was doing, she said. But when he died in a car bombing, I lost all protection. And why reveal yourself now? Selena asked, her voice trembling. Her mother looked down. Because you burned it all down, Selena. You exposed the Kawajas. You made the world pay attention. I thought maybe for once we could stop hiding. Zion stepped forward, having listened from outside. You don't have to hide anymore. Her mother's eyes filled, and for the first time, tears rolled down her cheeks. I thought I raised a daughter to be safe. But instead, I raised a warrior. Months passed. The Kawaja name was now synonymous with scandal. Selena's story had gone viral. Newspapers, interviews, a best-selling memoir. But she stayed quiet, declined the talk shows, donated the proceeds to shelters for trafficked children. She and her mother moved to a quiet place by the sea. Zion proposed on the same pier where they had once stood silent. No fireworks, just a ring and a trembling smile. You gave me back my life, she told him. No, he replied, kissing her forehead. You took it back yourself. Years later, Selena stood before a crowded auditorium. Her first public speech since the fire. Behind her, a giant screen with a photograph of her mother, now an advocate for women in witness protection. She looked out at the crowd, her voice steady. I used to think revenge would fix everything. But it only destroys what's left. What saved me wasn't rage. It was truth. And the people who walked beside me when the world turned its back. She paused, glancing at her mother and Zion in the front row. I was born in fire. But I rebuilt myself in light. Applause thundered. And finally Selena smiled.